In a frozen Chicago winter, a 6-year-old girl clutches two crumpled dollars, trying to buy bread for her starving 3-year-old brother. When a powerful billionaire stops and truly sees them, one small act of kindness ignites a battle of love, family, and fate that no money can control. The wind cut through Chicago like it had teeth. Mara Quinn tightened her grip around two crumpled dollar bills, rubbing them between her fingers, as if warmth might appear if she tried hard enough. Her gloves were too thin. Her coat was too short. Everything about her was too small for the job she was doing. Beside her, Eli cried. Not the loud kind of crying, no tantrum, no drama. Just a broken, exhausted sound, the kind that came from a stomach that had given up hope. I know, Mara whispered, bending down so the wind wouldn't steal her words. I know, Eli. Just a little longer. She was 6 years old, and she was already tired in a way adults recognize too late. The bakery window glowed gold against the gray street steam, fogging the glass loaves stacked behind it like treasures in a museum. Bread. Warm bread. The smell hit Eli first. His crying sharpened. Hungry, he sobbed. Mara, hungry. Mara swallowed. She pressed her forehead briefly to the cold glass just for 1 second, then straightened her shoulders the way she'd seen grown-ups do when they were about to ask for something they couldn't afford. $2. She counted them again, slowly, like counting time. Around them, people passed, boots crunching over ice coats, brushing by eyes sliding away. No one wanted to see a 6-year-old making adult decisions on a frozen sidewalk. Mara reached for the door handle. The bell chimed. Warmth rushed over her like a wave. She stepped inside, pulling Eli with her, and for the first time that day she dared to believe $2 might be enough. The warmth almost made Mara dizzy. Her eyelashes fluttered as her eyes adjusted, drawn instantly to the bread behind the glass rows of golden loaves. Crusts cracked just right, steam still breathing from them. It felt unfair how close it all was. Eli stopped crying. He stared. Mara guided him forward, one small hand gripping his sleeve, the other clenched tight around the money. She rehearsed the words in her head the same way she always did. Please, just bread. The cheapest one. The woman behind the counter looked up. Mrs. Kowalski. Her hair was pulled back tight, flour dusting her apron. Her eyes flicked from Mara to Eli to their shoes. How can I help you, sweetheart? She asked. Mara lifted the bills onto the counter, carefully smoothing them flat like they were something precious. Bread, she said. Her voice was steady, practiced. Just one. The smallest one. Please. Mrs. Kowalski glanced at the price sign. Mara saw it too. She felt the drop in her stomach before the words came. That one's $4, the woman said gently. Mara nodded. Too quickly. Okay. Then she looked again, scanning desperately. Maybe that one $3.50. Her fingers curled slightly instinctively, pulling the money back like it might run away on its own. Eli whimpered again, quieter now, his face crumpling as if he understood more than he should. Mara leaned down, blocking him from view, pressing her forehead to his. Hey, she whispered. It's okay. I've got you. She straightened and looked up again. Can you cut it? She asked. Just a piece. I don't need the whole thing. The bakery went very quiet. Behind the glass, the bread sat untouched. And somewhere near the door, unseen for the moment, a man in a dark navy coat stopped walking. Mrs. Kowalski hesitated. Business was business. Rent was rent. Rules were rules. But the way Mara stood, chin-lifted shoulders, squared eyes, begging without tears, made something tighten in her chest, a piece she repeated slowly. Mara nodded. Please. He's 3. She didn't say he hasn't eaten. She didn't say it's been all day. She didn't say I already tried everywhere else. She had learned that explaining too much made adults uncomfortable. Mrs. Kowalski reached for the knife, then stopped. The bell at the door chimed again. A man stepped inside, tall, composed, his coat perfectly pressed despite the weather. He smelled like clean wool and something expensive. He paused, taking in the scene, the two children, the money on the counter, the untouched bread. Mara felt it before she saw him, that quiet shift in the room. She pulled the bills closer, bracing herself. Adults like this usually meant questions, or judgment, or being told to leave. Mrs. Kowalski cleared her throat. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "I can't. I'll take care of it." The voice was calm, low, certain. Mara turned. The man met her eyes, not over her head, not past her, but straight at her level. No rush. No pity. He stepped closer and placed his hand flat on the counter next to the $2. "How much for a full loaf?" he asked. Mrs. Kowalski blinked. $4. He pulled out his wallet without hesitation. Mara's heart pounded. "No," she said quickly. "It's okay. The man shook his head once. Gentle, final. "It's not charity," he said. "It's lunch. He paid." He nodded to Mrs. Kowalski. When the bread was placed in Mara's hands, still warm, she froze. Eli reached for it instinctively. Mara looked up at the stranger, her voice barely audible. Why the man knelt slightly, lowering himself so he wasn't towering over her. Because he said someone should have helped you sooner. And for the first time that day, Mara didn't know what to say. Mara didn't move. The bread warmed her hands, but it didn't warm the fear in her chest. Eli reached again, small fingers trembling, and she let him take a bite, just one, because she'd learned the first bite calmed the panic. His sobs softened into a quiet, desperate chewing. The man in the navy coat watched without staring. That was the first strange thing about him. Most adults either looked too hard or not at all. He stood back as if giving her space mattered. "I'm Graham," he said, voice low enough that it didn't echo through the bakery like an announcement. Graham Vale. The name didn't mean anything to Mara. It sounded like any other adult name, but the way Mrs. Kowalski's shoulders stiffened did. "Yes, Mr. Vale," the woman murmured, suddenly polite in a way she hadn't been 1 second earlier. Mara's eyes flicked between them. Important. That was what her body translated. Important meant powerful. Powerful meant unpredictable. Graham glanced down at the 2 crumpled bills still on the counter. He didn't touch them. He didn't slide them away like he'd rescued her from them. He left them where they were, as if her effort still mattered. "Is there anything else you need?" he asked. Mara's throat tightened. The word need was dangerous. Saying it out loud felt like giving someone a knife. "No," she lied quickly. Eli, mouth full, whispered the truth like it couldn't be stopped. "Warm." Mara flinched. Eli Graham's gaze softened just slightly. "Warm," he repeated, as if he understood what that meant beyond temperature. He looked outside through the fogged glass. Snow had started again, small, sharp flakes turning the street into a slow disaster. Mara had seen this movie before. A little more snow, a little less energy, a little more hunger, and the day became a problem no child should solve. Graham turned back. "Where are you staying tonight?" Mara's spine went rigid. Her mind sprinted through every warning she'd ever built for herself. Don't tell strangers. Don't accept rides. Don't say where you sleep. She stood straighter, placing her body between him and Eli like a shield. "We're fine," she said, but her voice was too thin. Graham didn't argue. He crouched slightly, not close, just lower, so his eyes were level with hers. "I'm not asking so I can take something from you," he said. "I'm asking because the weather's about to get worse." Mara stared. People used nice voices before. Nice voices didn't always mean nice endings. She held the bread tighter. And then, because hunger made Eli brave, he reached toward Graham's coat with a sticky hand and whispered, "Cold. Outside." Graham didn't pull away. He simply nodded as if the smallest person in the room had said the most important thing. Graham stepped aside and spoke quietly into his phone. No flashy commands, no drama, just one sentence controlled and calm. Aiden, bring the car to the front. Now. Mara's stomach dropped at the word car. Her feet shifted instinctively toward the door. She could run. She could run and still make it to the underpass before the snow thickened. But Eli leaned into her coat, sleepy now, full of bread for the first time in too long. His eyes fluttered. His body, small and too light, trusted the warmth. Graham watched her calculation without interrupting it. Like he understood she wasn't deciding whether she liked him. She was deciding whether she survived him. You don't have to come, he said. You can say no. Mara blinked, thrown off by the permission. Most adults didn't offer doors out. They closed them. Then why she started? Because you're 6, Graham replied, plain as winter. And you shouldn't be negotiating bread like it's a business deal. That sentence hit Mara like a slap, not cruel, but accurate. Her face tightened. She hated being seen. The bell chimed as the door opened again, letting in a blade of cold air. A tall man in a driver's coat stepped in, scanning the room with professional focus. He nodded to Graham once and remained silent. Graham didn't touch Mara, didn't reach for Eli. He only took off his own scarf, cashmere dark gray, and held it out like an offering. For him, he said. Mara hesitated. Then she wrapped it around Eli's neck, tucking it gently under his chin. Eli sighed, melting into it. Outside, the black sedan idled at the curb windows, faintly fogged from heat. The streetlights turned the falling snow into glittering ash. Mara's hand tightened around the bread bag, her mind filled with worst-case endings. She looked at Graham. If we go, she said, voice small but sharp, you can't separate us. Graham's eyes held steady. I won't. You promise? He didn't say the word lightly. I promise. Mara studied him the way you study ice before stepping, testing for cracks, searching for traps. She saw expensive shoes, a clean watch, a face that looked like it was used to winning. But she also saw something else, exhaustion behind the polish, a loneliness that didn't belong in a man with that kind of money. Eli whimpered softly, half asleep. Mara. That was the final vote. Mara nodded once, a tiny motion that carried the weight of a whole life. They walked out together. The cold tried to grab them back, and the car door opened like a warm mouth. The heat inside the car hit Mara so suddenly she almost cried from it. Eli slumped against her, his head heavy on her shoulder. His eyelids fluttered, fighting sleep like it was a threat. Mara kept one arm wrapped around him, the other gripping the bread bag like it was proof that today had been real. Graham sat across from them, not beside, giving space, giving distance. The driver pulled away smoothly, tires whispering over snow. Chicago blurred past in streaks of white and gold. Storefronts, bus stops, people hunched against the wind. Mara watched every turn like she could memorize an escape route. Graham spoke gently, not too many questions. Do you have anyone you trust? He asked. Mara's mouth tightened. My mom, she said automatically, then corrected herself because truth always crept in. She's gone a lot. How long? Mara stared at the window. Long enough. Graham didn't push. Silence settled again, thick, careful. They stopped in front of a townhouse with warm light in the windows. Not a mansion, not a palace. Just a place that looked lived in. The kind of home Mara had seen on TV, where kitchens smelled like soup instead of fear. Graham stepped out first and opened the door for them, then held his hands, visible palms up, like he remembered Mara's rule about trust. Inside, the entryway smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs, gray hair and a loose twist cardigan wrapped around her like a hug. She stopped when she saw Mara and Eli, and something in her face softened so fast it looked like pain. Graham, she breathed, and then her eyes moved to the children. Oh, honey. Mara stiffened again. Adults made sounds like that when they felt sorry. Pity was dangerous. Pity turned into questions. Questions turned into taking. But the woman didn't rush them. She came down slowly, as if she didn't want to spook a wild animal. "I'm Diane," she said, voice warm, steady. "You're safe here. Safe." Mara's chest squeezed like her lungs didn't believe the word. Eli stirred, eyes barely open. Diane didn't reach for him. She simply held out a soft blanket, instead blue faded real. Mara hesitated, then took it. Diane guided them toward the kitchen without touching them, just leading with light and warmth. A pot simmered on the stove. Steam rose like a promise. Graham watched Mara's face the way you watch someone stepping off a ledge. He spoke quietly to his mother. "They needed help," he said. Diane looked at him, and in her eyes was something sharper than kindness. "You did the right thing," she replied. "Now we do it properly." Mara tightened the blanket around Eli. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, for the first time in a long time, the cold wasn't winning. Mara didn't sleep. She lay on the edge of the guest bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes open in the dim blue glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon. Eli slept beside her, finally heavy with warmth and food, one small hand curled into the blanket like he was afraid it might vanish. Every sound felt loud. The house creaked, old wood adjusting to the cold. Pipes hummed softly. Somewhere a clock ticked, like it was counting something important. Mara counted too. Breaths, seconds, ways this could end. She had learned that quiet moments were dangerous. Quiet was when adults changed their minds. The door across the hall opened gently. Footsteps slow, careful. Mara's body went rigid. She slid closer to Eli, ready to shake him awake if she had to run. But it was Graham. He paused in the doorway, not stepping inside. He didn't turn on the light. He didn't speak right away. "Hey," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "I couldn't sleep either." Mara stared at him, unblinking. He held up a glass of water and set it on the dresser near the door, keeping his distance. "For later," he said, "in case you wake up thirsty." That was it. No lecture, no questions, no promises that sounded too big to keep. He lingered for one more second, then stepped back, pulling the door almost closed, leaving it open just enough to say he wasn't locking anything. Mara listened until his footsteps faded. Her chest ached with a feeling she didn't recognize right away. Relief. In the kitchen downstairs, Graham leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair. Diane sat at the table with a cup of tea, watching him with eyes that had seen decades of worry. "She's guarding him," Diane said quietly. Graham nodded. "She hasn't stopped. That kind of vigilance doesn't come from nowhere," he swallowed. "I don't know how long they've been like this." Diane's voice softened. "Long enough to forget what peace feels like." Upstairs, Mara finally allowed her eyes to close, but only halfway. Her body stayed alert, listening, guarding. When Eli shifted in his sleep and murmured her name, she whispered back without opening her eyes. "I'm here." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a lie. Morning arrived quietly, like it was afraid to scare them. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, pale and hesitant. Mara woke instantly, sitting up before she remembered where she was. Her eyes scanned the room walls, door, window. Eli. Still there. Eli blinked awake and smiled, a real smile, slow and unguarded. "Warm," he said happily, burying his face in the blanket. Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Downstairs, the smell of eggs and toast drifted upward. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger this time, but from uncertainty. Meals came with expectations. Expectations came with consequences. She helped Eli off the bed, straightening his shirt the way she'd seen moms do in parks. They walked down the stairs together, hand in hand. Diane stood at the stove, humming softly. She turned when she saw them and smiled, not the wide, overwhelming kind. Just a small, steady one. Good morning, she said. You slept? Mara nodded. He did, she corrected. Diane didn't argue. Graham sat at the table, sleeves rolled up, tie nowhere in sight. A children's plate sat in front of Eli, scrambled eggs cut into tiny pieces, toast already buttered. Mara hesitated at the doorway. Graham noticed. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, he said. But it's here if you want it. Mara studied him, suspicious of how easily he said it. She sat anyway. Eli ate like someone racing an invisible clock, fast, careful eyes flicking up between bites. When no one tried to stop him or take the plate away, his shoulders relaxed. Mara ate slowly, watching everything. After breakfast, Diane said gently, We'll get you some warmer clothes. Mara's fork paused midair. We don't have money, I do, Diane replied simply. Mara's jaw tightened. We'll pay it back. Diane met her gaze. Someday, maybe. Today you're 6. Graham looked at Mara. I need to make a phone call later, he said carefully, to make sure everything we're doing is right. There are people whose job it is to help kids. Mara's stomach dropped. Cops, she asked. No, Graham said quickly. Not the police. People who make sure kids are safe. Her grip tightened around her fork. She nodded once, stiff and silent. The morning light crept across the table. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, a fragile normal was trying to exist. Graham waited until Mara and Eli were in the living room, bundled in borrowed sweaters, watching cartoons they didn't fully trust yet. He stepped into the study and closed the door halfway. Not hiding, just giving space. Diane watched him dial, her expression calm but alert. You're doing the hard part, she said. The right part doesn't always feel right, Graham replied. The phone rang. Tanya Ruiz, a woman answered. Professional, awake. My name is Graham Vale, he said. I have 2 children in my care who aren't legally mine. A 6-year-old girl and her 3-year-old brother. They were alone. Hungry. It's cold. A pause. Are they injured? Tanya asked. No. Are they safe? Graham glanced toward the living room where Mara sat, upright, eyes locked on the doorway, listening without pretending not to. Eli leaned against her side, sleepy and full. Yes, he said firmly. They're safe. Another pause. Longer this time. Where did you find them? Tanya asked. At a bakery. The girl had $2. That was all it took. I'll come by this afternoon, Tanya said. We'll talk. All of us. When Graham hung up, he exhaled slowly. Mara appeared in the doorway before he could speak. You called them, she said. Yes, he answered. No dodging. Her face went pale. Are they going to take us? No, he said carefully. They're going to ask questions? They're going to make sure you're okay? She shook her head, backing up one step. That's what they say. Graham lowered himself to one knee, not blocking her path. If at any point you feel scared, you say it. Out loud. And we stop. Mara studied him, eyes sharp, tired, too old. Promise, she asked. He nodded. Promise. Eli tugged at her sleeve. Cartoon, he whispered. Mara took his hand. She looked back at Graham one last time. I don't lie, she said. I just don't tell everything. Graham felt something twist in his chest. That's okay, he replied. We'll start with the truth you can carry. The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the house like a crack of ice, and just like that, the world was knocking again. Tanya Ruiz arrived without flashing lights or raised voices. She wore a simple coat, practical shoes, and a face that knew how to listen before it judged. When Diane opened the door, Tanya introduced herself calmly, showing her badge without drama. Thank you for calling, she said to Graham. Not everyone does. Mara stood halfway behind the couch, Eli tucked under her arm like a habit. Her eyes never left Tanya's hands. Tanya noticed. She crouched, not too close, not too far. Hi, she said softly. I'm Tanya. I talk to kids to make sure they're okay. Mara didn't answer. That's all right, Tanya continued. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but if you do, I listen. They sat at the kitchen table. Diane poured tea. Graham stayed silent unless spoken to on purpose. Tanya asked simple questions first. Names. Ages. Mara answered clearly, efficiently, like she'd practiced. Where have you been sleeping? Tanya asked. Mara hesitated, then shrugged. Different places. How many? Mara thought, counted on her fingers, stopped at 7. Eli crawled into her lap without being asked. Mara wrapped an arm around him automatically, never breaking eye contact with Tanya. Who takes care of you? Tanya asked gently. Mara's mouth tightened. I do. The room went still. Tanya didn't flinch. She simply wrote something down her pen, slow and deliberate. Has anyone hurt you? Tanya asked. No. Has anyone scared you? Mara nodded once. When Mara glanced at Graham, then away. When people don't say where they're taking us. Graham's chest tightened. Tanya closed her notebook. Thank you, she said. That was very brave. She turned to Graham. I'll need to speak with you privately. In the study, Tanya folded her arms. They're bonded, she said plainly. Strongly. I know, Graham replied. You also know this isn't simple, she continued. Temporary placement. Legal guardianship. Family court. I'm not afraid of paperwork, Graham said. Tanya met his eyes. I wasn't talking about paperwork. The next few days settled into a fragile rhythm. Mara watched everything. She watched Graham tie his shoes in the same order every morning. She watched Diane label leftovers and hum while doing it. She watched the doors, who opened them, who closed them, and whether they stayed closed. Eli started laughing. Not loudly, not all at once. But little bursts when the cartoon dog slipped, when Diane made silly faces, when Graham pretended to lose a game of blocks on purpose. Mara didn't laugh. She catalogued. Tanya returned twice, once unannounced, once scheduled. She watched how Mara flinched when voices rose, even in laughter. She noticed how Mara always let Eli eat first, how she waited to sit until she was told, even when no one demanded it. These behaviors, Tanya explained to Graham later, don't come from being spoiled. Graham nodded. They come from surviving. Tanya tested him, not with accusations, but with scenarios. What happens when this gets hard? She asked. When the press finds out, when your family objects, I won't send them away, Graham said without hesitation. What if it costs you? Graham thought of the empty penthouse he'd built his life in. Thought of Eli asleep on his shoulder. Thought of Mara finally letting her guard drop for half a second at breakfast. Then it costs me, he said. Tanya watched him closely. You don't sound like someone chasing a good image. I've had a good image, Graham replied. It didn't hold anyone when they cried. That afternoon, Mara finally spoke without being asked. Tanya was packing up when Mara stepped forward holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing, 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 2 small, all holding hands. Tanya accepted it carefully. Is this your family? Mara shook her head. It's what it looks like when someone stays, Tanya swallowed. That night, Graham sat alone in the study, the house quiet. He stared at the drawing for a long time. The idea didn't scare him anymore. It settled. The question arrived quietly. No dramatic music. No thunder. Just Graham standing in the doorway of the living room watching Mara help Eli button his sweater. Fingers patient, practiced, gentle. Mara, he said softly, can I ask you something? She stiffened immediately. Is it bad? No, he said. It's important, she nodded once. Okay. They sat at opposite ends of the couch. Diane took Eli to the kitchen on purpose, giving space without announcing it. Graham chose his words carefully, like they might break if handled wrong. If you and Eli couldn't stay here forever, he said, what would you be most afraid of? Mara answered instantly. Being separated. And if you could choose one thing, he continued, about where you live. What would it be? Mara stared at her hands. Thought, someone who doesn't get tired of us. Graham felt his throat close. Mara, he said steady but honest, I'm thinking about asking the court if you and Eli could stay with me, not just for now. Her head snapped up. You mean, like, family? She asked. Yes. Silence stretched. Mara's face did something strange, half hope, half panic. She stood abruptly. You can't say that unless you mean it, she said. Because if you change your mind, I won't, Graham said immediately. You don't know that, she snapped. Grown-ups always think they do. He nodded. You're right. I don't know everything. He met her eyes. But I know I want to try, for real, with paperwork, with rules, with people checking. Mara's breathing hitched. She crossed her arms tightly, holding herself together. And Eli, she whispered. Both of you, Graham said. Always both. Mara didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply sat back down closer to him this time and said the smallest, bravest thing she knew how to say. Then, don't leave. Graham nodded. I'm here, he replied. And somewhere deep inside the house, winter loosened its grip just a little. The first objection didn't come loudly. It arrived disguised as concern. Harland Vale called on a Tuesday evening, his voice smooth and measured the way men spoke when they believed they were being reasonable. Graham stood in the study with the door half closed. Winter light fading against the window. I hear you've taken in some children, Harland said. Graham didn't pretend surprise. Yes. A pause. Controlled, calculated. That's generous of you. They needed help. So do many people, Harland replied. But not many people invite that help into their lives. Graham leaned against the desk. I didn't invite chaos. I invited children. Another pause, longer now. Do you understand what this looks like? Harland asked. The press, the board, investors. A billionaire collecting poor kids makes for messy headlines. They're not headlines, Graham said evenly. They're Mara and Eli. Harland sighed as if disappointed. You're thinking emotionally. I'm thinking responsibly. No, Harland corrected him. Responsibility is legacy. Continuity. You don't jeopardize the Vale name on impulse. Graham's jaw tightened. This isn't impulse, it's attachment, Harland said, and attachment clouds judgment. Upstairs, Mara sat on the floor outside the study door, Eli beside her, pushing toy cars back and forth. She hadn't meant to listen. She just hadn't walked away fast enough. She heard the word poor. She heard messy. She heard jeopardize. Her chest tightened in that familiar way, like someone was slowly closing a door she hadn't noticed was open. That's not your decision, Graham said. Harland's voice hardened. Everything you have comes from decisions I protected, and everything I am, Graham replied quietly, comes from the ones you didn't. Silence followed. Cold. Heavy. Think carefully, Harland said at last. Because if you proceed, you do it without my support. The call ended. Graham stood still for several seconds, breathing slowly, grounding himself. When he opened the door, Mara scrambled to her feet, too late. Their eyes met. She saw it instantly, recognition, then regret. I wasn't, she began. Graham knelt in front of her. You didn't do anything wrong? She searched his face desperately. Is he mad because of us? Graham didn't lie. He's afraid of change. Mara nodded, absorbing it like a grown-up truth. People always are. She picked up Eli, settling him on her hip. Graham watched her walk away, 6 years old, carrying weight that wasn't hers. And for the first time, he understood the fight wasn't just legal. It was generational. Celeste Vale didn't call. She arrived. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she stepped into the townhouse coat, perfectly tailored smile, equally precise. She took in the space quickly, too quickly, cataloging value, risk, weakness. Well, she said lightly. This is cozy. Diane stood firm in the doorway. Children live here now. Celeste raised an eyebrow. So I've heard. Graham entered behind Diane, his posture calm but alert. "Say what you came to say." Celeste smiled wider. "Straight to business, always your flaw." She glanced toward the living room where Mara sat rigid on the couch, Eli tucked beside her. Mara felt the gaze like a spotlight. Celeste lowered her voice. "You're being reckless. I'm being careful," Graham replied. With strangers, Celeste scoffed. "They don't share your blood. They don't understand our world." Mara's fingers curled into Eli's sleeve. Celeste continued. "Do you know what adoption does to estate planning, to trusts, to perception?" Diane stepped forward. "They are not transactions." Celeste waved a dismissive hand. "Everything is a transaction. You just hide yours better." She turned to Graham, eyes sharp. "Father is prepared to cut financial backing. Board allies will follow. This will cost you, I know. And you still plan to proceed?" "Yes." Celeste's smile faded. "Then you're choosing them over us." Graham didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing what's right." Celeste exhaled slowly. "Then understand this, we will challenge you. Legally, publicly, relentlessly." Mara stood abruptly. "Stop," she said. Every adult froze. She stepped forward, voice shaking but loud. "We didn't ask for this." Celeste looked down at her, surprised. "Sweetheart," Mara shook her head violently. "We'll go if that fixes it." Graham's heart dropped. Celeste's eyes flickered just once. Diane crossed the room, instantly kneeling beside Mara. "No one is sending you away." But she said, Mara's voice cracked. "We ruin things." Celeste sighed, irritated. "This is exactly the problem." Graham moved, then placing himself between Celeste and the children. "You don't get to do this," he said coldly. "You don't get to frighten them to prove a point." Celeste stared at him. "You've changed." "Yes," Graham replied. "That's the point." She gathered her coat, composure restored. "We'll see what the court says." The door closed behind her with a final echoing click. Mara collapsed onto the couch, shaking. Eli clung to her. Graham knelt, his voice low and steady. "You don't leave to make other people comfortable." "But what if you have to choose?" Mara whispered. Graham met her eyes. "I already did." That night, Mara packed. Not loudly, not dramatically. She folded the borrowed sweaters, neatly lined up Eli's socks, placed the bread bag empty now on top like a marker. Eli watched her silently. "We going?" he asked, just in case she replied. She didn't cry. Crying made mistakes. When Graham found them near the door, shoes on coats half-zipped, something in his chest broke cleanly. "Mara," he said gently. She didn't turn around. "It's okay. We know how to leave." Graham knelt beside her, ignoring the cold creeping in from the doorframe. "You don't have to protect me." She finally looked at him. "I'm protecting him." She nodded toward Eli. "If we wait until people decide, it hurts more." Graham took a breath. "Listen to me." She hesitated, but she listened. "No one is taking you away tonight. Not tomorrow. Not because my family is uncomfortable." She studied his face, searching for cracks. "What if they win?" she whispered. "Then I fight harder," Graham said. "With lawyers, with courts, with truth." Mara shook her head, overwhelmed. "That's a lot." "Yes," he agreed. "But I'm an adult. That's my job." He gently removed the coat from her shoulders. "Your job is to be 6. She sagged slightly, the words hitting something tired deep inside her. Eli tugged at Graham's sleeve. "Stay," Graham smiled sadly. "Yes." Mara's resolve finally broke. She pressed her forehead against Graham's chest just for a second, allowing herself to lean. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. If it gets bad, don't disappear." Graham wrapped his arms around both children, careful, protective, real. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, snow continued to fall, indifferent, relentless. Inside, a small family chose each other in defiance of legacy money and fear. And the fight ahead, legal, public, painful, no longer scared Graham the way it should have. Because now he wasn't fighting alone. The story broke on a Thursday. It didn't use names at first. It never did. It used phrases instead. Sources say allegedly close to the family. A billionaire. 2 poor children. Questions about motive, about image, about power. By noon, the phone didn't stop ringing. Graham turned it face down. Outside the townhouse, a car lingered too long. Then another. A camera lens flashed once through the windshield like an eye blinking open. Inside, Mara felt it before anyone explained it. The air had changed. Diane moved faster than usual, closing curtains, lowering her voice. Graham paced, speaking to lawyers in short, clipped sentences. Every sound felt sharper, louder, like the house itself was under inspection. Mara sat on the floor with Eli lining up toy cars by color. She corrected one that was out of place. Then another. Order helped when the world tilted. "Are they coming?" she asked quietly. Graham knelt beside her. "No one's coming inside without permission." "But they're talking," she said. "About us." "Yes," he admitted. "And that's not fair." Mara absorbed that in silence. That afternoon, Tanya Ruiz arrived again, this time with a thicker folder and a careful look in her eyes. "We need to talk," Tanya said. They sat at the table, papers spread out like a map of obstacles. "There's pressure," Tanya explained. "From the family, from outside parties. They're questioning placement stability." Mara's fingers tightened around Eli's sleeve. "Does that mean—" she started. Tanya met her gaze directly. "It means we have to follow procedure very carefully." Graham leaned forward. "You're talking about temporary separation." Tanya didn't deny it. "Short term, while the court reviews guardianship." Mara's heart slammed. "No," she said, standing abruptly. "You said I know what I said," Tanya replied gently. "And I don't want that either. But I need your help." Mara stared at her. "How, by being honest?" Tanya said. "About how you're feeling." Mara laughed, a short, sharp sound. "I feel like everything good gets taken." Silence followed. That night, Mara couldn't sit still. She paced the hallway, listening to adult voices behind closed doors, words like injunction, custody, media strategy, floating past her like a foreign language. She packed again, this time faster. When Graham found her, she didn't argue. "If they take us," she said flatly, "they won't take us by surprise." Graham sat beside her on the floor. "You shouldn't have to think like this." "But I do," she replied. He reached out, not to stop her but to steady her hands. "Whatever happens," he said, "I will find you." Mara looked at him, eyes fierce and scared all at once. "People always say that." "I'm not people," Graham said. Outside, another camera flashed, and the walls felt thinner than ever. Mara woke before dawn. The house was quiet in the way that meant something was coming. She slid out of bed, careful not to wake Eli. She dressed him slowly, whispering reassurance with every button. "It's just a walk," she murmured. "We're just early." Eli nodded sleepily, trusting her without question. She wrote a note. The letters were uneven but determined. "We'll be okay. Don't look for us right away." She didn't sign it. The front door creaked softly as she opened it. Cold rushed in, sharp and familiar. She welcomed it. Cold was honest. "Mara." She froze. Graham stood at the foot of the stairs, fully dressed, keys in his hand. He hadn't slept. "I knew," he said quietly. She didn't turn around. "I can't let them split us. They won't," he said. "You don't know that," she snapped, tears finally spilling. "You don't know what it's like to be counted and sorted like boxes." Graham walked to her slowly, stopping a few feet away. "You're right," he said. "I don't." He knelt. "But I know this, you don't have to disappear to be safe." She shook her head. "Running is the only thing that's ever worked." Graham nodded. "Then let's change what works." Eli stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Where we going?" Graham smiled gently. "Nowhere scary." Mara looked at him, really looked tired, eyes rumpled coat, a man who had everything and was still choosing this fight. "What if they make you choose?" she whispered. "I already chose," he said. She broke then, fully. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing the kind of sobs that come from holding too much for too long. Graham held her, didn't rush, didn't fix, just stayed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," he replied. "Me too." When she finally pulled back, her face was red and wet and 6 years old again. "I don't want to be brave today," she said. "You don't have to be," Graham answered. "I will." They closed the door together. Later that morning, Tanya arrived with urgent news. "There's a hearing," she said. "Emergency review." "Today?" Mara stiffened. "Court, yes." Eli grabbed Graham's hand. "You come, I'll be right there," Graham said. Mara took a deep breath. Then, "I'll tell them." "Tell them what?" Tanya asked. Mara lifted her chin. "The truth." The courtroom was smaller than Mara expected. No windows, beige walls, flags that didn't move. It felt like a place where voices disappeared. Mara sat with her feet dangling, Eli beside her, swinging his legs gently. Graham sat behind them, not touching, but close enough to feel. Harlan Vale sat across the room, composed, flanked by Celeste, and a man in a sharp suit, Miles Ketter, the family lawyer. Papers were stacked neatly in front of them, like ammunition. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The words began formal, clipped, careful. Allegations, concerns, stability, optics. Miles Ketter spoke smoothly. "My clients question whether this placement is appropriate given the media attention and emotional involvement." Graham's lawyer countered with facts: school plans, medical care, therapy appointments already scheduled. Then Tanya stood. "These children were found hungry," she said plainly. "Cold. Alone. Since placement, they've shown measurable improvement in health and emotional regulation." Miles smiled thinly. "Children often bond quickly with benefactors." Mara's hands clenched. The judge looked down. "Mara Quinn," he said. "Do you want to speak?" The room went silent. Graham's breath caught. Mara stood. Her knees shook, but she stood. "Yes," she said. She didn't look at Harland. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the judge. "I had $2, she began. "I tried to buy bread. It wasn't enough." She swallowed. "My brother cries when he's hungry. He cries like he's falling." Eli looked up at her, confused but calm. "I take care of him," she continued. "I always did. But when Mr. Vale helped us, he didn't take him from me. He stood next to me." She glanced back once at Graham. "They say he's too attached," she said. "But I think that's what family is." The judge leaned forward slightly. Eli raised his hand. "Yes?" the judge asked, surprised. "He makes the scary stop," Eli said simply. Silence. It filled the room completely. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. He turned to the attorneys. "I will issue a temporary ruling today." Mara sat back down, heart pounding. Graham squeezed his hands together, waiting. Winter pressed against the walls outside, and inside everything balanced on one small truth spoken out loud. The judge didn't speak right away. He sat back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes moving slowly from one face to another. The room held its breath. Even the papers seemed to stop rustling. Harlan Vale's posture remained perfect, straight spine, chin, lifted, confidence sharpened by decades of winning rooms like this. Celeste sat beside him, composed but tense, nails pressing lightly into her folder. Mara counted her breaths. Eli swung his legs, unaware of the weight pressing down on everyone else. This court, the judge finally said, is tasked with determining what serves the best interests of the children. Miles Ketter rose smoothly. "And with respect, Your Honor, the public scrutiny alone." The judge raised a hand. I've heard enough. The silence snapped tight. He looked directly at Mara. You've carried responsibility beyond your years, he said. That is not something this court wishes to reward or require any longer. Mara's eyes widened slightly. The judge turned to Graham. Mr. Vale, your resources alone do not qualify you to be a guardian. Graham nodded once. Understood. But the judge continued, your conduct does. Harlan's jaw tightened. Effective immediately, the judge said the temporary guardianship will remain with Mr. Vale pending full adoption review. The siblings will not be separated. The words landed like thunder. Mara's chest collapsed inward, breath leaving her in a rush she hadn't planned for. She clutched Eli so tightly he squeaked. We stay? Eli asked softly. Yes, Graham whispered. You stay. Celeste stood abruptly. This is a mistake. The judge's voice cut through the room. This hearing is concluded. The gavel fell. It was over. Outside the courtroom, cameras surged forward. Questions flew like hail. Graham shielded the children with his body, Diane at his side, Tanya guiding them through the chaos with practiced efficiency. As they reached the elevator, Harlan spoke one last time. You've chosen a difficult road, he said to Graham. Graham met his father's gaze, steady and unflinching. I finally chose the right one. The doors closed. Mara leaned her head against the elevator wall, eyes shut, legs shaking. For the first time in her life, an adult decision had ended in her favor. The house felt different when they returned. Quieter, softer. As if it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Diane set mugs of hot chocolate on the table, marshmallows floating like small white islands. She didn't speak. She just stayed close. Eli curled up on the couch, already half asleep, his thumb brushing the sleeve of Graham's sweater. Mara stood in the middle of the living room, unsure what to do with her hands, now that she wasn't bracing for impact. Graham approached slowly. You were very brave today. Mara shook her head. I was scared. That counts, he said. She studied his face carefully. They didn't make you give us back. No. They didn't make you choose, I chose already, Graham replied. Mara nodded, absorbing the permanence in his voice. Later that night, Graham found her sitting on the stairs, staring at nothing. Do you know what tomorrow looks like? She asked. He sat beside her. School paperwork. Winter coats. Normal things. She frowned slightly. Normal sounds strange. He smiled. We'll learn together. She hesitated, then asked the question she'd been holding back since the courtroom. Do I still have to be the grown-up? Graham's chest tightened. No, he said gently. You get to be 6. I'll handle the rest. Mara leaned her head against the banister, thinking. What if I forget how she whispered? Then I'll remind you, Graham said. Every day. That night, Mara slept without her shoes on. She slept without listening for footsteps. Downstairs, Graham stood alone for a moment, staring at the quiet house, the mess, the toys, the crumbs on the counter. For the first time, it felt full. Spring came slowly. Snow melted into gray slush, then disappeared altogether. The city softened. So did Mara. She still counted things, sometimes steps, breaths, exits, but the numbers no longer ruled her. One Saturday morning, Graham took Mara and Eli downtown. They stopped in front of the bakery. Mara froze. The window still glowed warm. The bread still sat behind glass like treasure. Mrs. Kowalski looked up and gasped softly. Well, I'll be. Mara stepped forward, heart pounding, and reached into her pocket. She placed $2 on the counter. Mrs. Kowalski smiled gently. Bread's on me, sweetheart. Mara shook her head. I want to pay. The woman accepted the bills and added a roll to the bag anyway. Outside, Mara handed Eli the bread. He took a bite and grinned, crumbs everywhere. Graham watched her quietly. She walked back inside and slipped something into the tip jar. Another $2. Graham raised an eyebrow. You sure? Mara nodded. Someone helped us when we were hungry. She looked up at him. Someday I want to do that too. Graham knelt beside her. You already are. They walked home together, hands linked, the city buzzing around them. That night, Mara taped a drawing to her bedroom wall. 3 figures, holding hands, standing in front of a house with light in every window. She crawled into bed, pulled the blanket up, and whispered the words she no longer said in fear. I'm here. This time the house answered back. And somewhere between $2 and a full heart, a family was born. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.